The sun was just rising, but the world felt darker than ever for two young children sitting quietly outside a small broken house. Their mother had taken her last breath only a few hours earlier, and now they were left in a silence so heavy that even the birds seemed to pause before singing. The older child, a boy of 12, sat with his arm wrapped around his little sister, who was only 8. She buried her face into his shoulder, holding on as if she might slip away if she let go. They were trembling, not from the morning chill, but from the kind of fear children should never have to feel, the fear of being completely alone. Their house was more like a shell of a home. The roof leaked when it rained, the walls were cracked, and the furniture inside was old and worn. Their mother had tried her best to make it warm and loving, but now that she was gone, the air felt cold and empty. She had been sick for a long time, coughing late into the nights, but she never complained in front of her children. She had always told them everything would be all right, even when she herself had no strength left. When her sickness grew worse, she would whisper to her children, "Be strong. Always stay together." They didn't fully understand why she repeated those words so often, but now those words rang in their ears louder than ever. The boy remembered how, the night before, she had smiled at them weakly, brushed his sister's hair back with shaky hands, and whispered those same words once more. By morning, she was gone. The children did not know what to do. They had no father, he had passed away years earlier in an accident. Their mother had been their only parent, their only guide, their only shelter in the storms of life. And now that shelter had been taken away. The boy wanted to be strong, because he knew that's what his mother wanted, but inside, he felt like a small child himself, lost and afraid. His sister kept asking in a soft voice, "Where will we go? What will happen to us?" He had no answer, so he simply hugged her tighter. Neighbors slowly gathered around the little house. Some came with sad faces, others with whispers about how hard life had been for the mother and her children. Many had helped in small ways before, bringing food when the mother was too weak to cook, or giving old clothes for the children, but now the situation was too heavy for anyone to solve easily. A few women tried to comfort the children, but they knew they could not take on the responsibility of raising them. Their own families were already struggling, their homes already crowded. Some wiped their tears and said prayers, others just stood with heavy hearts. The little girl clutched her mother's old scarf, pressing it against her face as if the smell of her mother's perfume was still there. The boy kept looking at the ground, his jaw tight, trying not to cry because he knew he had to protect his sister. Inside, though, he felt broken. Time moved slowly that morning. The sound of footsteps came, and with them arrived 2 people from the local authorities. They had been told about the situation and came to speak with the children. Their voices were calm, but their questions felt heavy. They asked about relatives, about where the children could stay, about what they remembered. The boy answered as best he could, but when they mentioned the word foster care, his heart sank. He had heard stories about children being sent to different homes, sometimes even separated from their brothers or sisters. He quickly held his sister's hand and whispered, "I won't let them take you away from me." She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. The small crowd outside the house grew quiet as they watched. Everyone knew the children had no one else. They had no grandparents nearby, no uncles or aunts who could take them in. Their future was uncertain, and that truth weighed on everyone's hearts. A neighbor tried to comfort the boy by patting his shoulder, but he only shook his head. He didn't want comfort, he wanted his mother back, and he wanted his sister safe. As the day went on, word of their loss spread through the town. People talked about it in shops, in schools, and on street corners. "Those poor children," many said, "they have nowhere to go." Some people wanted to help, but they knew their limits. Sympathy was everywhere, but solutions were nowhere. The boy carried their few belongings into a small bag. It wasn't much, just a couple of shirts, a worn pair of shoes, a few books from school, and the picture of their mother in an old frame. He wrapped the picture carefully in a cloth and told his sister, we'll keep this safe always. She nodded silently, her eyes fixed on the photo as if it could somehow bring their mother back. Nightfall was approaching, and the children still sat outside. The authorities discussed what to do, speaking quietly to each other, while the siblings held onto each other tightly. They had no idea what tomorrow would bring. The boy thought about his mother's words again, always stay together. That was his only plan, his only hope that no matter where they went, they would never be torn apart. The little girl finally spoke after hours of silence. She whispered, "Do you think Mama can see us?" The boy, fighting back tears, answered softly, "Yes, she can. She's watching from above. And we have to be strong, like she told us." He tried to smile for her, even though his own heart was breaking. She leaned against him and closed her eyes, tired from crying. The sky turned darker, the stars slowly appearing. The children were now left with the unknown, what home would mean for them tomorrow, who would care for them, and how they would survive. Yet even in that deep sadness, one thing was clear, they had each other. And in the quiet of the night, while their mother's memory surrounded them, they promised themselves silently that they would never let go of one another, no matter what happened next. The next morning came slowly for the two children. The boy opened his eyes and for a moment he forgot what had happened, but then the memory of his mother's still face came rushing back, and he felt a sharp ache in his chest. His sister was curled beside him, still holding onto his arm even while she slept. She had cried herself to sleep, and her face was marked with tear stains. The boy did not want to wake her, but the sound of voices outside reminded him that they could not hide from the world. When the girl finally opened her eyes, she looked around as if searching for her mother. Then, realizing she was gone, she clutched her brother tightly again. "Don't leave me," she whispered. He rubbed her back and replied firmly, "I won't. We'll stay together, always." Though he said it with courage, inside he was terrified of what might come next. By mid-morning, the officials returned to speak with them. The children were asked again if they had any family who could care for them. They shook their heads. Their father had been gone for years, and their mother's relatives were far away and barely in contact. The boy said quietly, "We only had Mama." The officials nodded with pity in their eyes, but pity was not enough. They spoke in soft but serious tones about placing the children in foster care. The boy's heart raced as he remembered stories he had overheard, children being placed in homes with strangers, sometimes separated from their siblings. The thought of being parted from his sister was unbearable. He held her hand tightly and whispered again, "I won't let them take you from me." The little girl looked at the officials with wide, frightened eyes. "We don't want to go anywhere," she said softly. "This is our home." But they both knew the broken house, with its empty rooms and silence, could no longer be their shelter. Still, the idea of leaving it behind felt like losing their mother all over again. Neighbors continued to gather and bring small things, some bread, some milk, a few blankets. Their kindness was real, but everyone knew it was temporary. No one in the small community had enough space or money to take the children in permanently. Some women wiped their eyes and said, "If only we could do more." Others muttered, "It is such a hard world for children without parents." The siblings listened to these words without replying, but the weight of them pressed down heavily on their young hearts. As the day wore on, people from the town came by to pay their respects. Some spoke softly about the children's mother, how she had always worked hard, how she smiled even in her sickness, how she loved her children more than anything. The siblings sat quietly, clutching the old scarf and the photograph, too young to understand why the world kept moving while their own had stopped. Later in the afternoon, one of the officials made a phone call. The boy overheard words like temporary shelter and foster family. His heart began to pound. He turned to his sister and said, "They want to take us away." The little girl's eyes filled with tears. "But we promised Mama we would stay together," she said. "We have to." The boy felt something fierce rise inside him. "We will," he said firmly. I'll fight anyone who tries to take you away. He wasn't sure how he could fight grown ups or rules, but he knew he would never let go of her hand. The hours passed slowly, filled with uncertainty. Some neighbors tried to distract the children with food or small toys, but the siblings could not smile. Every sound, every whisper about their future made them more anxious. The boy sat with his sister outside, watching the road, wondering if someone might come for them, though he had no idea who that someone could be. By evening, news of their situation had spread even further. A local reporter had written a small story about the children, two siblings left with nothing after losing their mother, sitting outside their broken house with no place to go. The story was shared on local news and social media, touching the hearts of many. People commented with sympathy, some asking how they could help. But sympathy alone did not change the fact that the children were still waiting, unsure of where they would sleep that night. The boy tried to be strong for his sister, but inside he felt waves of fear and sadness. He thought about how his mother used to hold their hands when they walked to school, how she used to tell them stories at night, how her laughter filled the small house even when she was tired. The thought that he would never hear her laugh again was too much, and tears slid down his face before he could stop them. His sister noticed and wiped his cheek gently. "Don't cry," she whispered. "We'll be okay. Mama said so." Her words, though simple, gave him a little strength. As darkness began to fall, the authorities prepared to take the children to a temporary shelter until decisions could be made. The siblings clung to each other tightly, refusing to let go. "We don't want to go," the boy said firmly. "We want to stay together here." The officials tried to explain gently that they could not stay in the house alone. The boy's eyes filled with anger and desperation. He knew the world was bigger than their little town, but at that moment, it felt like the whole world was against them. The little girl looked up at the night sky and whispered, "Mama, please help us." Her brother squeezed her hand and said softly, "Maybe someone will hear us. Maybe something will change." He didn't know how, but he wanted to believe it. The stars came out, one by one, and the children huddled together under the old blanket a neighbor had given them. Around them, the adults whispered, argued, and planned, but the children only heard the sound of each other's breathing. They had no control over what would happen next, but deep inside, they carried a hope that somehow, somewhere, someone would see them not just as a problem to be solved, but as two children who needed love, care, and a place to belong. That night, as they closed their eyes and tried to rest, the boy held his sister close and made a silent promise: no matter where they ended up, he would protect her. He did not know that far away, someone had already read their story, and that person's heart was moved in a way that would soon change everything. Far away from the little town where the children sat in their grief, a man sat in his large house surrounded by silence. He was a well-known millionaire, respected for his business success, admired for his wealth, and often spoken of with curiosity. Yet, despite the beautiful mansion, the expensive cars, and the life people envied, his days were strangely empty. He had no children, no wife anymore. He had lost her years before, and no laughter echoed in the halls of his grand home. He had everything money could buy, but when the day ended, he always sat alone. On that particular evening, he sat in his study, flipping through channels absent-mindedly. He stopped when he saw a local news story that caught his attention. The screen showed two children sitting outside a small house, holding each other tightly. Their faces were pale with sorrow, their eyes red from crying. The words beneath the picture read, "Siblings lose mother, left with nowhere to go." The man froze. Something inside him stirred, something he had not felt in years. He turned up the volume and listened carefully. The reporter spoke about how the children had lost both parents, how the neighbors were concerned but unable to care for them, and how officials were trying to find a place for them. The story ended with a simple sentence: "They have nowhere to call home tonight." The millionaire leaned back in his chair, his heart heavy. He saw in those children's eyes a pain he understood too well, the pain of losing someone you loved so deeply that life felt broken without them. He remembered the day he lost his wife, the crushing silence afterward, the way he would walk into the house and half expect to hear her voice, only to realize again and again that she was gone. He had felt that same emptiness that now showed on the faces of those children. For a long moment, he stared at the screen, unable to look away. Then he whispered to himself, they shouldn't go through this alone. Something about them reached deep into his soul, shaking him from his comfortable but lonely life. He knew he had the means to help. More than that, he suddenly wanted to help, not with money alone, but with something far greater: a home, love, and family. Without hesitation, he stood up and made a decision that surprised even him. He called his driver and said firmly, "Take me to that town. I need to see those children." The drive took hours, but his mind was clear. He thought about what it would mean. People might question him, wonder why a wealthy man was suddenly taking in 2 children who were strangers. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was the look in their eyes, the silent cry for someone to notice them, someone to say, "You're not alone anymore." Meanwhile, in the little town, the children still sat together. They had refused to let go of each other, no matter what the officials said. The boy was determined, his small shoulders squared as if he could carry all the weight of the world if it meant protecting his sister. She leaned against him, tired and frightened, whispering now and then, "Will Mama come back?" And each time he gently reminded her, "Mama is watching us, but she can't come back. We have to be strong." When the black car finally arrived and stopped near the old house, everyone turned to see who it was. The millionaire stepped out, dressed in a simple suit, his face calm but serious. The townspeople recognized him immediately. He was known by name, though no one expected to see him here in such a humble neighborhood. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd, "Why is he here? What does he want?" The children looked at him nervously. They had never seen someone like him before. To them, he looked like a stranger from another world, polished, powerful, and completely different from the people they knew. But there was something gentle in his eyes, something that made them hesitate instead of turning away. He walked slowly toward them, not wanting to frighten them. When he reached the siblings, he knelt down so he could look at them eye to eye. His voice was soft when he spoke. "Hello. I heard about you both. I'm very sorry about your mother." The little girl hid her face in her brother's arm, but the boy stared back at him, cautious and protective. "We don't want to go anywhere," the boy said firmly. "We want to stay together." The man nodded with understanding. "I know," he said. "And I promise you, no one will separate you. I would never let that happen." His words carried a quiet strength, the kind of promise that sounded real. The boy narrowed his eyes slightly, still unsure. "Who are you?" he asked. The man smiled gently. "My name is not important right now. What matters is this: I have a big house, but it's very empty. I would like to open it to you. I want you to have a home, not just for tonight, but for always." The words seemed almost unbelievable. The little girl peeked out from her brother's shoulder, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "For always," she whispered. The man nodded. "For always." The officials looked at each other in surprise. The neighbors murmured among themselves. Some could hardly believe what they were hearing: a millionaire offering his home to 2 children he had just met. But when they looked into his eyes, they saw sincerity, not charity. The boy turned to his sister, and for the first time in days, a small flicker of hope appeared in his expression. "What do you think?" he whispered to her. She looked up at him and whispered back, "Maybe Mama sent him." The millionaire reached out his hand carefully, not forcing, just offering. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "You are safe now. You'll stay together. And if you let me, I'll be the one to look after you." The boy studied him for a long moment, his mind racing between fear and hope. Finally, with a trembling hand, he reached out and placed his small fingers into the man's hand. His sister quickly followed, slipping her tiny hand into his other. The crowd was silent as they watched the moment unfold. The millionaire stood slowly, holding the children's hands in his own. He turned to the officials and said in a voice filled with certainty, "They're coming home with me." At that instant, the children's world began to shift. For the first time since their mother's passing, they felt a glimmer of safety. The boy looked at his sister, and she gave him a small smile through her tears. It was the first smile she had managed in days. The millionaire led them gently toward his car, the children still holding on tightly to each other. Behind them, the townspeople wiped their eyes, some whispering prayers of gratitude, others shaking their heads in wonder. It was a sight none of them would ever forget, the richest man in the region walking hand in hand with two of the poorest children, not as a show, but as the beginning of something real. The car door closed, and as it drove away, the children looked out of the window, their old house growing smaller and smaller in the distance. It was painful to leave, but in their hearts, they knew something had changed. They were not alone anymore. Someone had heard their silent cries. Someone had answered. And though they did not yet understand the full meaning of it, that night marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one filled with possibilities they never imagined. Their small hands locked tightly as the world outside the window blurred past. The boy kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, still unsure if he could trust what was happening. His sister leaned against him, her head heavy from exhaustion but her eyes wide with wonder. Neither of them had ever been in such a car before, so clean, so quiet, so different from anything they had known. The millionaire sat with them, not in the front but beside them, as though he wanted them to feel that he was not far away. He did not speak too much during the ride, only glanced at them now and then with a gentle smile. He could sense their fear, their hesitation, but also their hope. He did not want to overwhelm them with questions. Instead, he let the silence wrap around them, giving them time to breathe after so many painful days. The drive ended at a set of tall gates that slowly opened to reveal a mansion beyond. The children stared with wide eyes, their mouths slightly open. The house looked like something from a picture book, large windows glowing with warm light, a garden filled with flowers, and a driveway so wide it could have been a playground. The little girl whispered softly, "It's like a palace." Her brother squeezed her hand but said nothing. In his heart, he wondered if this place could really ever feel like home. When the car stopped, the millionaire stepped out first and held the door open for them. He extended his hand, and after a small pause, the children stepped out together. The boy kept his protective arm around his sister's shoulder as they followed the man toward the house. Their steps were hesitant, their eyes scanning everything as though afraid it might vanish if they blinked. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. The floors shone like glass, the ceilings stretched high above them, and the room seemed endless. A soft rug cushioned their feet, and a chandelier sparkled overhead. The children froze, not daring to move further. "Don't be afraid," the man said gently. "This is your home now. Everything you see here belongs to you as much as it does to me." The little girl clutched her brother's arm. "But it's too big," she whispered. "What if we get lost?" Her words brought a small, tender smile to the man's face. "Then I'll walk with you," he replied warmly. "And I'll always find you if you feel lost." He led them through the room slowly, showing them the living room with soft couches, the dining table large enough for a family feast, and the kitchen that smelled faintly of fresh bread. Everywhere they looked, they saw things they had never dreamed of owning. Yet, strangely, it all felt almost frightening. They had lived in a small, broken house with only a few belongings, and now they were surrounded by luxury that seemed unreal. Finally, he guided them upstairs to 2 bedrooms prepared just for them. The boys' room had a sturdy wooden desk, shelves with books, and a comfortable bed covered in blue sheets. The girls' room was painted in gentle colors, with a doll resting on the pillow and a blanket that looked soft as clouds. The girl's eyes filled with tears when she saw it. "Is this really for me?" she asked. The man nodded, his voice quiet but steady. Yes. It's yours. No one will take it away from you. She ran to the bed and touched the blanket as if testing whether it was real. Then she looked back at her brother, who stood stiffly by the door, still uncertain. He was grateful for the kindness but carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He asked seriously, "Why are you doing this? We don't even know you." The question hung in the air. The millionaire knelt so he could look directly into the boy's eyes. "You're right," he said softly. "You don't know me yet. But I know what it feels like to lose someone you love and to feel alone in the world. I don't want you to go through that by yourselves. I can't bring your mother back, but I can give you a place where you feel safe. I want to be here for you, if you'll let me." The boy's lips trembled, but he nodded slowly. His sister came to stand beside him, holding his hand. She whispered, "Mama wanted us to stay together. Maybe this is how." That night, they all sat together at the long dining table. The children ate quietly at first, not used to so much food or such a grand setting. Plates of warm soup, fresh bread, and fruit were placed before them. The little girl nibbled shyly, while the boy glanced around the room, still suspicious but slowly letting his guard down. The millionaire did not pressure them. He asked only simple questions: what subjects they liked in school, what games they enjoyed, what memories made them happiest. His voice was patient, and whenever they looked nervous, he reassured them with a smile. At one point, the little girl set down her spoon and asked in a small voice, "Are we really allowed to stay here forever?" The man leaned forward, his tone gentle but certain. "Yes," he said. "This is your home now. You are not guests. You are family." Those words brought tears to both children's eyes. The boy tried to hide his emotions, but his sister openly wept, covering her face with her hands. The man stood, walked around the table, and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You are safe," he said softly. "You will never have to wonder where you belong again." Later that night, when the children lay in their new beds, they whispered to each other across the hallway. "Do you think Mama can see us now?" the girl asked. "I think she can," the boy replied. "And I think she's glad we're safe." For the first time in many nights, the children fell asleep with a sense of comfort instead of fear. Meanwhile, the millionaire sat in his study, looking out the window at the starlit sky. He felt something he had not felt in years: peace. His house no longer seemed so empty. For so long he had lived with wealth but without joy. Now, with the laughter and small voices of the children echoing faintly upstairs, the silence had been broken. He realized that maybe this was what his life had been missing all along. The following days brought more change. The children slowly adjusted to their new surroundings. They explored the garden, played with toys they never thought they would own, and sat with the man as he read them stories in the evenings. At first, they were shy, careful with every step, but gradually they began to smile more, laugh more, and trust that this new life was real. The boy, though, still carried responsibility. He often asked questions about school, about their future, about what would happen if something went wrong. The man respected his seriousness and spoke to him with honesty. "I will be here," he reassured him. "You are not alone anymore. You don't have to protect your sister by yourself. I will help you." Those words touched the boy deeply. For so long, he had been both brother and father to his sister. Now, for the first time, he felt the weight on his shoulders ease just a little. The little girl, on the other hand, quickly grew attached to the man. She followed him around the house, asking questions, showing him drawings, and often slipping her hand into his without saying a word. Every time she did, his heart softened more. As days turned to weeks, the mansion transformed from a cold house into a warm home. And though the children still missed their mother terribly, they began to understand that they had found something new: a protector, a father figure, and a place where they were loved. The days slowly turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The children were no longer the frightened, silent figures who had once clung to each other outside their broken house. They still held their mother's memory close, but now their lives had begun to fill with new moments of warmth, laughter, and safety that they had thought were lost forever. Every morning, the boy and his sister woke up to sunlight streaming through wide windows instead of the dim cracks of their old house. They had their own beds, their own clothes neatly folded, and a breakfast table waiting for them. At first, they ate quietly, unsure if such comfort would last. But over time, their voices grew louder, their laughter more free, as they realized no one would take it away. The millionaire, though still called Sir by the townspeople, had become simply uncle to the children. The girl sometimes slipped and called him Papa, and though she blushed when she did, he never corrected her. In fact, those words softened something deep inside him. He had never imagined himself as a father, yet now, every time she held his hand or the boy looked to him for guidance, he felt as if life had given him a role he had been waiting for all along. School soon became part of their routine. The children were enrolled in one of the best schools nearby. On the first day, they were nervous, holding their new bags tightly. The boy worried about fitting in, while his sister feared she might not make friends. The millionaire knelt beside them at the school gate and said gently, "You don't have to be the best at everything. Just be yourselves. That's enough." His words gave them courage. When they returned home later that day, their eyes were bright as they told him about the teachers, the playground, and the new friends they had met. Evenings became special in the mansion. Sometimes they ate together at the grand table, but more often they chose the cozy corner of the kitchen, where they could laugh and share stories more freely. The girl liked to draw pictures of their mother, and the boy often shared memories of her, making sure his sister never forgot her smile. The millionaire encouraged this, knowing that remembering their past was part of healing. He even set up a small corner in the house with their mother's photograph and a vase of fresh flowers, so they would always feel her presence. The children, in turn, brought life back into the house. Their footsteps echoed through the halls, their laughter filled the garden, and their small voices filled the quiet rooms with warmth. The mansion no longer felt like an empty palace, it felt like a home. The man who had once lived surrounded by silence now found himself listening to bedtime stories, school recitations, and playful giggles. Still, the transition was not without challenges. Some nights, the little girl woke up crying, missing her mother. Each time, the millionaire would sit by her bedside, holding her hand until she drifted back to sleep. The boy, too, struggled with sudden waves of sadness. He sometimes stood by the window, staring out at the night sky, wondering if his mother could truly see them. The man never forced him to speak but stood beside him in silence, letting him know he was not alone. Slowly, the boy began to open up, sharing his fears and hopes. The man listened with patience, offering reassurance not through grand promises but through steady presence. One weekend, the millionaire surprised them with a trip to their old neighborhood. At first, the children hesitated, they were afraid of the pain of returning. But when they arrived, the neighbors gathered with joy, amazed at how healthy and happy the siblings looked. The children proudly introduced the man as their new family, and though the old house still stood empty, they felt less afraid seeing it again. The boy whispered to his sister, "Mama's words came true. We stayed together." The millionaire also made another decision that touched the community deeply. He established a foundation in the children's mother's name, aimed at helping families who struggled with illness and poverty. He explained to the siblings, "Your mother was strong and loving. This way, her kindness will keep touching others." The children felt proud, knowing their mother's memory would continue to shine beyond their own lives. As time went on, the bond between the three grew unshakable. The boy no longer felt the crushing burden of protecting his sister all alone. He had someone he could look up to, someone who guided him gently but firmly. The girl, once timid and fearful, now ran freely through the garden, laughing with the man she had come to trust completely. The millionaire himself, who once returned each night to an empty house, now found himself looking forward to school reports, art projects, and small hands tugging at his coat. Holidays became moments of pure joy. On their first winter together, the children decorated a large tree in the living room. They placed their mother's photograph at the top, surrounded by lights, as if to say she was watching over them. They baked cookies together, made a mess in the kitchen, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. The millionaire, who had once thought such simple pleasures were behind him, realized that happiness did not come from wealth but from the warmth of family. One evening, as they sat together watching the stars, the little girl asked softly, "Do you think Mama is happy for us?" The man placed his arm around her shoulders and replied, "I believe she is. She wanted you to be safe, and now you are. And she gave me a gift too, the chance to have you both in my life." The boy looked at him carefully and asked, "Do you think of us as your children now?" The man's eyes grew moist, and he answered with no hesitation, "Yes. From the moment I saw you, I knew I wanted to protect you like my own. You are my family." Those words sealed something unspoken between them. The children leaned against him, and for the first time, they truly felt they belonged not just in a house, but in a heart. The story of their new life spread far beyond their town. Newspapers wrote about the millionaire who had taken in 2 orphans and given them not just a home but a future. People admired his generosity, but he always replied humbly, "I did not save them. They saved me from my loneliness." Years later, when the children looked back, they remembered not only the pain of their loss but also the miracle that followed. They remembered the promise their mother had made them keep to stay together and how life had brought them someone who helped fulfill that promise. They remembered the fear of having nowhere to go, and the relief of hearing the words, "This is your home now." And above all, they remembered how kindness had changed everything.